All systems go. Cleared for takeoff.
What's up, everyone? Tyler Tamboline here, aka ToeTagginTambo, back for another edition, the second last edition of the swing season. Talking golf, we got the Buddy B, as my guy Andy likes to call it. I'm going to bring him in here in a second. But before we do, I want to remind you guys, if you're just here on the way in, first time watching, whatever it may be, do us a favor, smash the like, subscribe to the channel. We just hit 4,000 subscribers, which is awesome. We appreciate it. When we hit 5, we are going to be giving away a 1-year membership to SHIPITNation.com. We'll talk more on that in a little bit. I've got the ownership here, stuff to go through. But Andy, the Buddy B, I like that one, man. What's going on? How are you?
Not much, man. I'm great. I just got to say, for anyone who's watching right now, I have so much respect for you. I salute you. We are one and the same. Listen, this is probably, I would imagine, this is our least watched show of the year. Right? I mean, is there any event in that you would power rank lower than this in terms of fan interest? It's got to be at the bottom of the totem pole, right?
I might watch TGL before this.
I think so as well. I gotta say, I think so as well, which is a whole other podcast, what we can do someday. But yeah, I mean, listen, like I've said a million times, it's not close for me. The fall swing is by far the most profitable time of the year for me. It's like I said, like it is, you get this opportunity during football season where a lot of the people that are generally focused in on golf are no longer focused in on golf. They're focused in on football. A lot of those people come back in January. So for the people, I've said this a million times this fall swing, and I've been lucky enough for my track record kind of to speak for itself in this particular year. But if you're willing to do the legwork, I do think this is we'll say fun, opportunistic slate for us still to break down this week, Tambo.
There's still money to be made. That's what we say. And I got to say, too, I missed the Fantasy Golf Degenerates this week, had some travel stuff to organize to get ready for the King of the Beach next week. So shout out to my guy, Jeff Feinberg, your buddy as well. He hopped on, got the job done with my guy, Kenny Kim. And then he goes and hops on the show with Mayo and Cuss. That was some incredible viewing on Monday Night Football when they were watching the Chargers at the Jets. So I'm still excited, man. We're still here. It's the second last event to round out the season. Then we get a little break. We are going to have some of this. I love this one, sure. Rowdy. He says, least watch show. Damn. What does that say?
What does that say? It says you're a legend. Like, I was joking. I turned 29 on Friday and I texted my group chat the model that I had made for the Butterfield Bermuda. And they were both like, can we just pause to take a second that you spent a portion of your 29th birthday making a model for the Butterfield Bermuda? And I was like, oh gosh, that when you say it like that's a lot sadder than I had intended it.
Happy belated, by the way, but it is sad because it's before you even turn 30, let alone 40 or something like that. Like this is just 29-year-old man out here building models on his birthday. That's incredible stuff for this tournament of all things. So happy belated to Mr. Andy Lack. And then we'll get on with it. I mean, we'll do what we normally do, guys. We're going to break this down. We'll stay interactive. We're going to build the $200 single entry by God. We got to cash more than just one of these things in the swing season. It's been insane how many 5 out of 6s that have been so close, or 4 out of 6s with upside that we just missed on the number or something like that. So just shows people how tough these single entries can be. I like Andrew's comment here. This show pair is so elite. Can't wait till regular season. That's going to be the fun in it. But we wanted to show you guys that we can still pull it off in the swing season, get the job done, be here for you to support you, and just give you a little taste of what it would be like. It's obviously going to be a lot busier, more interactive, and more exciting when we do get to the regular season. Anything else you want to comment on that, Andy, before we get to this early weather, and then we'll get to the tiers as we always do?
No, but I think we should spend some time on the weather because it's, probably by my numbers, one of the most wind affected tournaments that we're going to see all year. Now, with that being said, the inverse of that is that there's just not a lot of good plays this week, right? So I think the balancing act of, okay, do we want to play a weather edge versus are we willing to potentially give up some of the guys that we feel comfortable about to play guys in another wave? That's where I think the conversation gets a little bit interesting.
Yeah, well, you can start it because this is where this is the thing. I agree with the second part more than the first. Like, I don't know, what do you see in the weather that has you talking about it more than most? Because a couple of people have brought it up to me, and every time I go and look, it's either changed significantly already or it doesn't look like it. To me right now, what I see is Thursday looks like it's low winds, maybe a little more in the morning, but nothing crazy. But then Friday, then it balances out completely. And then Friday looks like it's higher winds for sure. They're going to be playing in those winds, but it looks like it's pretty even across the board. So what are you seeing differently, or what are you seeing with the winds that has it standing out for you? Because you said most affected event that you've seen this spring season.
No, I'm not playing a weather edge at all. I see exactly what you're seeing. What I basically am meaning is that I think people are potentially going to overrate it this week because
we're on the same page then.
Yeah, because we have seen it in the past. Now, with that being said, you've mentioned the fact that this weather has changed a couple of times. I started monitoring this when I was writing my preview article over last weekend. And, there were times over the weekend where it looked like there was going to potentially be a big edge. I've been monitoring it pretty closely all day. I'm not seeing a thing in terms of like one specific wave having a much easier path than the other. I would say I do think you can make an argument for some sort of stack in both directions strategy, right? Like if you wanted to create a couple lineups that are basically hedging your bets and saying, okay, I see nothing now, but what we have seen in the past with this event is that there usually is a weather edge that formulates. So just in case that happens, I'm going to make a couple lineups that protect me from the fact that maybe Friday afternoon does get way crazier than Friday morning, right? Like it looks consistent now, but you're also going to get firmer greens on Friday, right? And so who knows, maybe something kicks up that is unforeseen on Wednesday morning, right? Like we are in Bermuda on a coastal course. I will never tell you that I am some sort of weather expert or weather pattern expert, but what I can tell you is that in my experience playing a lot of DFS, I will call myself an expert when it comes to looking at wind as it pertains to golf. And what I can say is that typically if you are a golf course on the coast, you are going to see more changes and more variability in wind direction and what you potentially see in a regular weather report. So I think you could still make the argument for stacking in either direction. But like I said, Tambo, we'll talk about the slate. Like we can transition into talking about the slate. Even if there was a weather edge, like a massive one, there are so few guys that I feel super, super confident in. Like I have a very small player pool this week that I don't know how much I would be willing to give up guys that I'm super confident on just because of the possibility that there's some sort of weather edge that hasn't even emerged yet, right? That we haven't even seen as of Wednesday.
Yeah, well, I'll just say this. Like, if I do that, it's always PM AM. And I guess if you look, there is like one forecast. But again, this is what I think is throwing people off is like the 2 a.m. to 8 a.m. on Thursday is really windy. That like they don't golf during that time. They're not getting up at 2 a.m. and golfing. So it's really even by the time 8 o'clock hits and on. So I see people will see that. And then what they're seeing on Friday is 8 p.m. till midnight is really windy. So it kind of looks on paper like PM AM would have an advantage from this angle. When you look at like a super forecast, some of the other sites, I don't see anything. It's not like that at all during the actual hours they'll be golfing. So take that for what it's worth. You guys know I always like stacking some PM AM, especially at a tournament like this when there's a lot of perceived, at least what people would call scrubs. We know these guys are all incredible golfers. They're on the PGA Tour. Like this is the point of the swing season to go out and make their hay and get into the mix. But there's a lot of pressure that comes with making these cuts. I say it all the time. It's so much easier, at least from my experience watching golf, playing DFS golf, everything, just seeing it, where when they go on the morning, just post a number and let everybody play catch up. A lot of times you see that with some of these weaker golfers. So I don't hate it from that perspective if you want to go the PM AM wave. but I don't see a lot of it. A lot of the plays that I'm on are both sides. The good news is, Andy, we've got a balance in these tiers, so we can get to it now that we know. I'll call out the tee times if you want when we get to them, just in case. But like, for example, up top, Adam Scott, Brendan Todd, PM AM. Dietrich and Akshay, AM PM. And the next wave, it's like 3-4. The next wave is like 5-4. It's pretty close that you can play guys from every set where there's golfers that have the different tee times. So if you really want to get after it, I have no problem with it. I'm just not seeing it the same as everybody else's. That's just me. We do the show. We break it all down. Our guy Degenerate 75 does a show right after this on his channel. He goes more in depth. Maybe he sees something I don't. I'm going to check it out after, but just to say it, that's how I play it. I'm going to play some PMAM, but not really purposely beyond what I always do. I just think there's a mentality factor, and if the wind could pick up, even better. So let's talk about this upper tier, Andy. We got Adam Scott down to Akshay, and we'll talk if you see any steam. I think, obviously, if people are playing this PMAM side, we already had the highest ownership on Scott and Brendan Todd. So if anything else, it's just going to bring them up even more and bring Dietrich and Akshay down some, is what my thinking would be.
Yeah, I'm not seeing a massive difference between these four. I have every single one of these guys in the 19 to 24 range.
Yep.
Does that check out for you, Tambo?
Pretty close, yeah.
Maybe with Akshay on the higher end. I just think Akshay's playing such great golf right now and has sort of already developed a reputation of somebody that you want to play on these windy coastal tracks. He just finished 10th last week in Mexico. My favorite is Dietrich, to be honest with you. And I actually think that Dietrich might be on the lower end in terms of ownership. Like I said, I don't think ownership on any of these guys should be a defining factor for why you are on or off a guy. I think they are all going to end up. Maybe we see a guy catch late seam. Like I said, if there's anybody that would, my nomination would be Akshay. But if I had to guess as of now, these guys all fall in within the same range, with Dietrich maybe on the lower end at like 18, 19%, and Akshay on the higher end at like 22, 23, 24. But Dietrich's my favorite. I just think that this is probably the guy that has the most upside in terms of what he's able to do with his golf course, what his ball striking is on. We've already seen him finish second at this golf course last year. He has a 22nd as well. For a guy that hits the ball a long way, I have him as the number one player in this entire field on shorter golf courses. He's really underrated with a wedge in his hands. And the interesting thing about Port Royal is that there's virtually no middle iron skill. Like, this is a golf course where you're going to have essentially 12 shots inside 125 yards and 6 long iron shots. Like, you've got 3 par 3s that are long and a couple long par 5s that are reachable that you'll hit long irons on. And we'll talk about how we can use that specific skill set to make decisions farther down the board. But Dietrich is the guy for me at the top, Tambo.
Yeah, I like the angle and the course setup. I will say one thing, though, is like, you didn't really talk about Adam Scott. So what is your take on Adam Scott here? Because I have a take on him. I just am getting your thoughts on him first. And then another thing I want to ask you, actually, while we're on this, is also your take on like stars and scrubs versus balanced this week. Because while you're picking Dietrich and making a case for him, it doesn't sound like this range is like particularly exciting beyond Dietrich. And that's just a pick because we're talking about this tier. Give me your thoughts on that as well.
Well, I don't want to shortchange Brendan Todd. I think Brendan Todd is a fine play. We can make all the jokes we want about, you're really going to play 20%, 10.3 Brendan Todd. It's the Buddy B. You got to throw all preconceived notions and rules out the window. There's not a bad play on this slate. I mean, there will be on Sunday nights, but I could tell you right now, if you gave me the time, I could argue for pretty much any single guy on this entire slate based on course fit, skill set, and ownership. There are a couple guys that I think are overowned. I don't even think any of the guys in the 10K range are overowned. I don't think there's any crazy, ridiculous groupthink going on. I think that Scott's ownership is respectable. Dietrich, Todd, even Akshay. I think those ownerships are respectable, right? So I don't have a strong opinion on Adam Scott. I'm not playing him. Maybe you have a stronger take on Scott this week. I prefer Dietrich and Todd. And I'm definitely there on Dietrich. I have a final decision to make on Todd, and that kind of affects how many guys I end up utilizing in the nines. But if I had to rank up Tambo, I'd probably go Dietrich, Todd, Akshay, Scott, if I'm being honest. And we've been agreeing a lot this fall swing. So maybe it's a good thing if you're super heavy on Scott, but I'm not anti. I think they're better options in my opinion. He's never played the course before.
Yeah.
It's not like super correlated.
This will definitely be somewhere on the opposite side. Like that's my strong take is that I think this is the thing. And I'm already going to adjust his ownership because I just don't see him being as popular at this point. I think first off, the balanced builds this week are going to be more popular because I don't think anyone feel like you just made cases for Dietrich. We're opposite sides on Scott, and I'll go more into that in a second. People know about Todd and here, and he won and all this stuff in the past. Like, oh, that's fine. But then they see 10-3 and they're like, still not too sure. Akshay may get some late steam to your point, but I actually had him coming in projected as one of the lowest. Him and Dietrich kind of were the bottom two. Dietrich being the lowest. I think people like the next range. I think they can get behind Herbert. I think Glover at 9,500 is fair. List, Pendrith, Gim, all these plays. So I do think that this range is going to be kept in check. It will still be owned, like you said, but I just think that people can get to these balanced builds, and I think I can too. My take on Scott is that people have said this for years. Oh, he only comes top 30. He only comes top 40. He literally only ever plays, and as the schedule changed on him, he actually played in even more of these events, but he only plays like the majors and the hardest events, and he was coming 30th and 40th with the best players in the world, the fields that include all the biggest names, Rory, Rahm, etc. So I like to play Scott in weaker fields. This is the weakest I think I ever remember Scott playing in, and it's almost perfect storm-esque where maybe he gets to 19, 20%. I'm thinking now, like maybe that's where he's at, 20%. And I don't care about 22 or 21. I'm just saying I think that the point would be it's kind of the perfect storm because in all these other spots this season, we've seen these top price guys like Ludwig and others, Max Homa, all those guys get up to 30, 35%. We're not getting that from the top price golfer in this field. And we have a ton of guys from 7K and up that we can mix in with him. So it's not as much of a love for Scott as it is a love for the situational aspect of what we have in front of us. So from a tournament perspective, even though he's getting some ownership, I can get different in so many places, and it's not as much as maybe we would usually see the guy in this spot get. So that's my take on Scott and this top range in general.
So back to the question of balanced for stars and scrubs, would you play Scott with another 10K guy?
You can. I would probably lean to a 9K guy like Scott, and then somebody like I like Pendrith. We'll get to the 9K. We could segue there if you want, but I'm saying
sure.
I would rather do it that way. I don't know. I haven't messed around too much. I'm still going to build a bunch of my lineups after the show as I usually do. I'll adjust the ownership for SHIPITNation.com. Then I'll go back and change it. Build out some more of my lineups once we have that in there. But I think that it's possible. I guess I haven't messed with it too much. We could look at it when we build our single entry along the way. But I really do feel like it's just going to be better if you go Scott and drop down. I think a lot of people are able to get like one 9K guy and a bunch of 8s. When we get to the 8K range, Smalley, Hubbard, Hardy, Whaley. Like there's all kinds of guys in the 8K range. Davis Riley. Like if people are going to play multiple 8K guys, that's a way to get different this week is to play like one 8K guy or less. Basically would be different. So that's how I would think about that. Anything else in the 10K range you want to talk about? If not, take us into this 9K range. I know our guy, Rin. I always mess this up. I think he said Rhinestone, like Rhinestone. Ryan Shepard. He said, really love Herbert as my highest spend, has been doing well in WT and sure had a bad cut recently, but he is way too good to have another stinker, especially in this field. Yeah, again, back to field strength. I think that matters, but it's still a tough field to battle through. So talk to me about this range here, Andy. What do you got in the 9K range?
Well, the guy that stands out to me the most that I bet at 30-1 is Ben Griffin. But you're paying a price for him as it pertains to ownership. I actually think that him and Pendrith will both be in the 19-20% zone. Like I have Griffin and Pendrith as the highest owned players in this range. I'm going to play, I guess this guy's 8.9, but I have to talk about him as it somewhat pertains to Ben Griffin because I view them somewhat similar in the sense that these are two guys that I bet. I'm not going to play both of them. I'm going to end up choosing between one of the two. I'm talking about Alex Smalley. I have both at 20%, right? And I have Pendrith at 20% as well, who I think you're probably a little higher on than I am. But after that, I do think Lucas Glover is a tad underpriced. I wouldn't have blinked based on what his recent resume is, the way that he's playing, if you wanted to put Glover in the 10K range with Todd and Akshay. And I think the ownership on Glover, I'm curious to get your take, but I have him at 17, which I think is pretty palatable. So for me, my favorites in this range are, I think I'm there on Glover. I think I'm going to play a 9.5 Glover. Maybe Ben Griffin. Again, that kind of draws us into the Alex Smalley conversation as well. And then he was good for us last week, right? Like, cause I remember we had somebody in the chat that was hammering the Doug Gim drum pretty hard. And I believe he ended up finishing top 20. I think you can go back there as well. I think he's probably in the 15-16% range, but yeah, Glover, Gim, and Griffin are really the guys I have a ton of interest in.
Yeah, he did end up being okay as well. Yeah, so good point on that one. I remember it was Matt. His name was Matt, and he kept hammering us, and we're like, all right, fine, Matt, we'll do it. We'll play him, and it worked out. And so that's fine. One thing I will note, though, I just was double-checking my lineups. I'm out on Griffin. I know everyone loves him. I know why. Like, it's good. I'm good on Griffin.
Do you prefer Smalley?
Yes, I do.
Okay.
And and you said you nailed like the theory of how I was going with it too, is like, I like Pendrith and Smalley, and they're both owned. So I just can't add in Griffin as well. Like that's where I'm making my shot there. It's not a Canadian thing that I want to play Pendrith. I liked Pendrith coming in. I like the stats. I like his numbers. I really like the spot for him at 9,100. So I think one thing too, I said this in my slate plan over at shipitnation.com, and I just put in there, like, if you're using Pendrith, remember there's multiple different ways to use him. Imagine starting a lineup with him. I don't think very many people do that. Even with him being 20%, I think more people have somebody above him, whether it's Griffin, whether it's Herbert, whether it's one of those 10K guys. Like, it just makes more sense that he's the second.
And then you can go super 8K heavy. Like, you could go Pendrith, Smalley, even
all
Hubbard.
The guys you want. Yeah.
Yeah.
Or the other angle is to try and get him in as your third man in. You know what I mean? Like, if somehow you could get like I don't know. Like, I don't love the Griffin one because I'm already doing both. But if you were doing the same thing we just said, and instead of playing Smalley with Pendrith, you could play Glover, Griffin, Pendrith, and see what that looks like. Or if you don't want Griffin, you say, well, you didn't like him a second, that's fine. Then Glover, List, Pendrith, Glover, Pendrith, Gim. And Pendrith is your second one in, but you still have 3 9K guys. Like, just that's how I was trying to frame it up. I also put that in there just to say, like, at least if there's something you want to do a little bit different with it, that might be the way to go about it. But it's, again, not who you play, how you play them. I'm trying to think of ways to get different with them. The one way I know to get different in this range is just to not play Griffin. I love your Glover call. I'm always a Herbert homer. So our guy earlier, Ryan, he said it. I do like Herbert as well. So for me, I got him Pendrith and Glover were my two favorites in this range.
Any thoughts before we move a little bit lower? Are you out on Gim this week, or are you going to go back there potentially?
I didn't have him in the first run. I know that people like him a lot too, but I don't think it's reflected in ownership. Like, I got to update him. I had him at 16. So I think it's somewhere around there.
I think you're right. I have him right around 16 too. What do you have Glover at, just out of curiosity?
17.
Yeah, me too as well. Okay, that's a good sign. Do we need to say anything on Noren or List before we move down? I think we're both kind of lukewarm on both.
I have lukewarm on List if you want to use that angle, but lukewarm List, we'll try him. But I would probably have him over Noren, to be honest. And that's just because I like Herbert. So I like Herbert. I like List. I like Herbert. I like Pendrith. I like Glover. But I have Glover and Pendrith above Herbert. And then it would actually probably be List. That's probably my order in the four of them. Is Pendrith, Glover, Herbert, List. That'd be my order.
Okay. I'm not exactly there on Herbert.
I don't think anyone ever really is. That's why it's weird. Like, his ownership shows 16. Probably right. It's probably right.
I think lower than that, man. I have Herbert.
Do you think Noren's higher than him?
I think they're both between 10 and 14. Yeah.
I feel like
I feel pretty good about that because there's no way, because if you have Pendrith at all the guys above 10K are going to be above 18%. And then Smalley's going to be 20% and Griffin's going to be 20%. I think that Herbert and Noren, maybe West are the three lowest owned guys in the 9s, and one of them is going to be 10%. And I think that there's a decent chance that I would say maybe Noren has slightly better bet to be lower owned than Herbert. But if you're playing Herbert, like, you're not worried about ownership. He's not going to be above 14.
No, and he gets even better for me. If he ends up dropping down, then that's perfect. So we'll take that. Yeah. But I like him better than Noren, and it may be that Noren ends up being the flip flop there. Maybe it's Herbert is 14 and and Noren is 13 or something like that. Like, you could see that. So I don't know. We'll see how it shakes out, but I think they're both the lower owned versions in this range, and I got no problem with them at all.
Shall we talk about some 8s?
Yeah, let's do 8s. This is a big one because this is where, I don't know, I'd like to see what you have the ownership in here, but Smalley for sure the highest owned in this range.
20 or higher than that?
I am at 21, so we're about right.
Okay. I think once you get past Smalley, I don't really have anybody above 15, but I have a lot of guys between 10 and 15, if that makes sense. So I have Hubbard at 11%. I have Nick Hardy at 12%. I have Davis Riley at 10. I have Dylan Wu at 11. I have Brandon Wu at 13. Vince Whaley at 12.5. And then, whoever priced Stu Cink, who's, missed 2 of his last 3 cuts on the Champions Tour at 8,300. Like, if you want to play a 3 or 4% Stu Cink, I'm not at the Butterfield Bermuda. Listen, like, I'm not going to argue with you too much. I'm not going to go in that direction, but I think Cink and Duffy are kind of the 2 head scratchers of why they're in the 8s. And I think there's a great leverage opportunity on them. But then all the other guys, I didn't mention Palmer, who is my favorite, and he'll be in the high single digits. I have him at 8. But all those other guys, it's kind of like a hog posh of like between 15 and 8%, with the outliers being Smalley and, on the other end of the spectrum in terms of very low ownership, I have Cink and Duffy. Does that sound about right to you?
The numbers sound perfect almost. Like, that's where I see it. I'm very interested to hear, Ryan Palmer, your favorite take when we get there. But the one thing that worries me, the chat already said it, I have it. I like it, actually. The woo squared. I just worry it turns into from woo-woo to a poo-poo platter, and people show that one. Like, it's not going to be good if you play both.
Who do you like more? Who do you like more? Because I think there's a clear favorite for me. I like Brandon a lot more than Dylan this week.
And I like Dylan a lot more because I think everyone likes Brandon a lot more, but I actually think Brandon is better. I was only really playing the ownership game there, but I like them both. I really do like the both. Everything sort of checks out for me on them, but they're not my favorite in this range. Like, I know Smalley is everybody's favorite, but to me, he is like basically Ben Griffin for cheaper. So I know both have similar ownership. It is what it is. That's just how I look at it. You can get different in other places. And I'm always a Nick Hardy truther. That's why I'm really interested in your take on Ryan Palmer, because Nick Hardy's actually getting ownership, or at least looks like late steam, versus Palmer has like no ownership at all. So what is your take on Ryan Palmer here?
Well, this is going to be a dead giveaway, but can you guess who the only player in this entire field is, Tambo? I mentioned that this course is inside 125 yards and from 200 yards plus. Can you guess the only player in this entire field that's top 10 in both?
It's going to be tough to answer. Maybe it's Ryan Palmer.
Yeah. Right. I think that this is a guy who finished 5th last week in Mexico, is still a great iron player, right? And I don't want to hear anything about the old man stuff coming off of Kuchar 2nd place finish, right? Like, these guys are fine, right? It's, listen, he's $200 more expensive than Stu Cink and 6 years younger than Stu Cink still. So I think Palmer can still play. He obviously proved that with a 5th place in Mexico last week. He is a wonderful long iron player, a great wedge player. And I think that at a very granular level, that is how to break down this golf course, right? Is to look at those two specific skill sets, because there's a very distinctive golf course in that way. Like the approach distances are not evenly dispersed here. You want to be targeting guys who can take advantage on the wedge holes. And guys, there are 5 big long iron shots on this golf course. So you kind of need to do both. And there isn't a guy in the field that kind of combines those two skill sets better than Palmer. And good ownership, right? Like 7-8%. Not a lot of people are talking about him. He's also low in the betting markets. I'm not typically one of those guys that is like, oh, the books don't want you to bet him, but he's like 30-1. So, take that for what you will. But someone besides me is betting Ryan Palmer this week. I can tell you that.
Man, I got something after. We'll show this at the end, but yeah, this is interesting. Also, just the leverage of the range too. Like it's the range that everyone's playing everybody but him in this range. So like, I think Hubbard. I think you had.
I like Hubbard too, by the way. Yeah,
you had Whaley's ownership up there a little bit, and Hubbard's down some. I would take a little bit off of Whaley and move it up to him, because I think people always like Hubbard. I do, and I know he pops in most things. So I like that, but there's a lot of guys. We could play our guys in the middle. I play Hardy. You've played Riley in the past, I believe, and you usually like some Davis Riley. So the Woos are there. Hubbard and Smalley up top. This Palmer, take in the middle is definitely interesting. So I'm gonna take note of that, and yeah, we'll keep her moving. We're gonna build our single entry at the end. Lesser crowd watching today, which is fine. But like we say, if you're here, appreciate the support. Help us out. Subscribe to the channel. Get in the chat. Let us know if you have any questions, and then smash the like. But let's keep going. Do you have anything else in the 8K range? If not, let's move into these upper 7s, because we'll save the time at the end so we can get the lineup in, show off a couple things quick. Already got something percolating in my mind here. So let's talk about this upper 7K range.
I like the upper 7s a lot. There are 4 guys basically in a row that I think are extremely playable. Peter Quest, Troy Merritt, Kevin Yu, Matthias Schmid. I like all of them. And from an ownership perspective, I think that Schmid is probably going to be the only one that you have to worry about being in the double digits. I think that Quest, Merritt, and Yu will all be in the 6 to 9% range, which I think is pretty palatable for this for the 7s this week in this field. Are you seeing this Justin Lauer ownership? Yeah. Because I'm not really.
That's what I was just going to add.
I don't really understand. I don't understand it at all, to be honest with you.
Him and Schmid, I think, are going to be the guys that come in here. And I was on Lauer actually until I updated my stuff. Like it was this morning when I doubled down, I went back and looked, and I was like, man, how is he getting pushed up there? The range is just way too loaded for that. I like him. Good player. It just gets tough when these guys get to like 12. Remember, we used to say this about the 6K range. We said this for the last couple of years now. I have like the 7s are the new 6s. Like it's the same. If a guy like this in this big of a 7K range is getting that much of a bump, and there's going to be players around him. Let's just go here and look for a second. Like we've got, who do we got down here? Like the 5s, the 6s, the 6, 6, 6, 4, 4, 9, 6. Like the 9 is Novak. But I mean, there's a lot of guys in the 4 to 5% range. If this guy's going to be 12 or something, that's just too much. There's too many other guys around him. So maybe he squeaks in if you got a lineup where you don't have a bunch of ownership in it already, and he can be that third guy in or something like that. Then I'm fine with him. I like him. I liked him more until this morning, but I took him out of my top tier rankings just because there's other guys in this range that I'm going to take shots on. Novak being one of them, and he's at 9. But he's down the board a little bit. So yeah, I see what you're seeing, and Schmid is the guy right behind him that also looks like he's getting the ownership.
Do you like Schmid or Lower better?
I like Lower better, but I'm not really high on either of them, to be honest, at this ownership now. So yeah, I have a little bit
and then of the 3 that I pointed out in the high 7s is potential pivot points that I like off of Schmid and Lauer. Do you have a favorite between Quest, Merritt, and Yu? Because I like all 3.
Yeah, I like Merritt for sure. I actually don't hate Griffin either. Lanto up at the very top at 7,900. Okay. He was another guy I had in this range that I'm going to. So A couple guys up there, and then most of my guys though in this range are down below. So don't think too much else up top here for me. You is probably I probably have it Merit you Quest, to be honest, but I think
Okay.
I don't know if
Fair
the quest experience is over or not, but the journey, the quest has ended maybe, but I'm not sure what we do with this guy.
It's not over for me, man.
Yeah, we got to play him. All right. He's
yeah,
low
I mean,
too, by the way.
Yeah, the long iron play. There's just a lot of important long iron shots on this golf course. But listen, I mean, is Peter Quest a Ponzi scheme? Potentially. We can talk about that as it pertains to Kevin Roy later. This is the week where it's like, if you have a final stand on a guy, if you've been playing a guy, I've had plenty of guys. I've gotten a lot right this fall swing. I've also had plenty of guys that I've been playing pretty much every week that kind of at my wit's end with. Quest being one of them, you being another. Like I said, we'll get to Kevin Roy later. But yeah, I'm pretty comfortable moving down into the low sevens where I think there's some players. Like I think there's some pretty decent options that you could go to.
Yeah, we'll
Generally,
go to
how
that in
many
a second.
players per
What's your
week
take
are
on this?
you
Like, what do we normally see? I try and think of the numbers. Like, I don't know, it's 20, 10, right? He's saying 10 because you're going to have 2 or 3 up top. Then you're going to have a heavy range of like 13 to 19. And then you got a bit of 10 to 12. So, I mean, there's enough of the field that's there. Obviously, it has to add up to 600. So you can figure that out. But it depends on the week. But this week looks like a lot of people are going to hover in that 9 to 12 range. And then, of course, we know the guys that are going to be above 15. So I think it's fine. Just be cognizant of like what we talked about earlier. Like you don't necessarily want to jam them all together in the same lineup. But even then on a week like this, if you really love them, there's lots of good plays that have low to no ownership down below here. So maybe that's a good segue. Do you have anything to add on that one before we go to this bottom 7K range?
Yeah, it just, like you said, it depends on how you play them. I think it's every week that's kind of going to break my brain. Because you think about, I would try and break it down by range, but I don't really think it matters as much as, it doesn't matter as much as how you utilize the guys.
And golf is an individual sport. So to take it from people watching this, I mean, I'm surprised there's this many people watching it as is already for this event, but just to say it, like if you're in golf, at least you can kind of get a feel for it. Like we review the lineups every week. We look at them on the Fantasy Golf Degenerates podcast. We see the winning lineups. Anybody that plays goes up and scrolls up to see them. It's usually a couple chalk guys, couple mid-tier guys, couple low-owned guys. Not to say you have to build exactly like that, because you could also have 2 20% guys, an 18% guy, and then a bunch of guys under 5% to make it still extremely unique and not put yourself boxed into these corners. But it's tougher when, for a 1v1 of that, it still is like when someone says this guy or that guy, and why I give him the coin flip is because it's more of like, I don't know what else is going on in the rest of your lineup. At least in a sport like NFL DFS, which we're in season now, you could say, okay, I'm between these guys. People do it all the time. I got this guy or this guy. They don't finish the question though. And then I just say, well, you're talking about 2 number 1 wide receivers. Who's your quarterback? Oh, it's this guy. Well, he matches up with the dude. If he has the number, if that guy gets there, he's going to be, if your wide receiver 1 gets there and that's the quarterback, pair him up with that guy. Like it's pretty obvious at that point in golf. A little bit more tricky when it comes to that because we don't know what your full build, what you're doing with the rest of it. And that's why I despise, truthfully, being, wear my heart on my sleeve, transparent guy. I despise 1v1 questions in PGA specifically because of that reason. Like we have no clue what you're doing with the rest of it. So I can just tell, and I'm exposed to a portfolio of golfers. So it's like, if you're asking for 2 $9,300, a 93 and a $9,200 guy, I probably have them both. I have them different percentages. I have different exposure. So I can give you my top exposed guy, like whoever I have the most of, but it doesn't, again, maybe my single entry has a different story. It just depends on the lineup. So it's really tough in golf. Shout out to my guy, BHJ. Sin numero uno, just here to hit the like and say good to see you, brother. Good to see you.
Love that.
I got our guy Tweezy's always here. Said late but here. Makes every show. Shout out to Tweezy. And then Double O says, speaking of Woo Square, we got O Squared.
God, that's a good deep dive. If somebody's actually has the data on how they finish when they play the same tournaments every week.
What's the sample on this? Do you think?
It's probably, I mean, they play the same tournaments. They have the same status. Neither of them are in the top 50. They're not into the elevated events. So it's got to be basically saying they're in the same fields every single week.
Yeah, I can't find enough on my sheet just to see. I can only see like 4 events back, and It's like they both suck is what it is. The answer to both of them. 54th, but they both came 59th.
Neither have been good this fall swing.
Miscut and last play, DFL. Like it's like basically the same thing. But yeah, maybe it's just not the play. And Andy and I talked a little bit about that as well. You can like the 8K range. There's also something to be said about just not playing the 8K range, whether it's the 9K guys or like the 10K, 9K, upper 8. I mean, you're not skipping completely, but maybe just play one guy instead of it. Like get your smallie playing there, but then move it down. So there's a lot of different things there. And then this question, Bermuda edge, a better angle than playing a iffy weather edge?
Maybe word that differently.
I think, is he asking about putting?
Are you saying, what do I think is more important this week, Bermuda putting or playing some sort of weather edge?
This weather angle, yeah.
Yeah, I would say go with the first one because I'm not seeing much in terms of a clear advantage for either wave. I really am not. And I do think how you putt on Bermuda greens, particularly ones that are running a bit slower, does matter this week a lot. This is a golf course with a really high greens and regulation percentage. So putting is going to have to be part of the calculus for sure.
Okay, awesome. Let's move on. Let's go to this bottom 7K range, get through this, and then we'll start building out the lineup. But let's talk first 7,400 down to 7K. It's a wide range. A lot of options in here. Maybe 2 or 3 guys that you like. If you've got more, it's fine. Just thinking out loud, like what we can talk through here. But what's your thoughts in this bottom 7K range?
I like Lipsky a lot. I like Patton Kizzire, Russell Knox, Andrew Novak, Scott Piercy, Chuck Hoffman. Any of those names, Tambo? Are we aligned on any of those? Or are you throwing out a totally different grab bag of guys?
No. I like some of them. I like the Knox call. More on him in a bit. So we'll
little bit ownership creeping up though, a little bit though, right? With Knox, maybe in that I have him at I have him at 10 or 11. I have him and Smotherman and Kraft as the highest, and Malnati, surprisingly, as the highest owned guys below 7.5.
Yeah, I still have Knox under 10 though, so we'll see where it actually comes in, but it's close.
I hope
but
you're right.
Either way,
that.
The thing is here is now I've got everybody pretty much like 5 to 9. So I know up top, I was saying the case about like Schmidt and Lauer at like 10, 11, 12. I know it's not that much different, but I'm saying like it's also the construction. If I just end up down with all the 5 to 7% guys, I really don't care. It's like, I want to add another 12% or 13% guy up into my Smalley, Pendrith, or whatever I'm playing type lineups up there. It's probably not the case necessarily. So, and where do I land with my actual roster construction? I think it's more unique to do that with like an Adam Scott and then drop way down to a bunch of 5% guys. So it's just one angle that I'm looking at, but I do like the Knox call. Who else do I like here? Obviously I like Novak. Do you have a Nick Dunlap take for me? Because I think it was Baroff who was selling me on this guy quite a bit. And then, now it looks like he actually got popular. So I just want to get your case on him. Do you know much about Nick Dunlap, the amateur?
No, he's one of the high outside of him being like a very decorated amateur, but I don't play those guys if I don't have data on them just yet. So I'm going to probably pass.
I just love these plays because it's the only time you get to it, but it's like, this is funny. 2 hours ago, the 4-minute read comes out from PGAtour.com. This probably says he's a bad play, but I always don't mind. I don't mind going down the well. It's the 5 things to know about Nick Dunlap. 1, rises to the occasion. 2, half of a powerful Birmingham duo with Sargent, right? We know Sargent. Everybody knows him, so you can see that. 3, lipped out college golf's first ever 59. So very good.
That's obviously impressive. Yeah.
Yeah. 4, decorated team competitor. The Walker Cup is where we just saw him do stuff. That's what the conversation was. And then 5, somehow they give him this one, ready to accelerate. So he's in the PGA Tour University Accelerated Program, blah, blah. Its first successful graduate was his guy, Sargent. And then it looks like he's got 11 points in it, they're saying. So 3 from his U.S. amateur win, 2 from his Walker Cup appearance, and 1 from appearing in the World Amateur Team Championships. So, like you said, following, he would be a favorite to finish atop the PGA Tour University ranking, go directly to the tour, following in the wake of Ludwig Oberg, or Aubert, however you want to say it. So, I don't know. Thoughts, 7,100, but now it looks like he's pushing 8 to 10%. Again, you can get away with it, so I don't care. I'll have some of them. I like them for that reason.
Yeah, I think there's a strong necessity for a lot of people to be early on like the next big thing. And that's a desire I don't usually share, but he might be great. I mean, who knows? Sam Benton was just brought up in the chat. Like, I think that's a guy that we at least have a little bit more data on that I'd feel a little bit more comfortable with. But no, I'm the guy that plays, 45-year-old Chuck Hoffman this week. So I'm probably not the best guy to ask when it comes to these up and comers. I tend to go with a couple more of the grizzled vets.
Okay. You picked Palmer earlier. I'm putting Sam Bennett in the single entry. I just remembered.
Interesting.
When you said that. Well, because you just said something that reminded me, and Mayo got me on this earlier. The end of last regular season, him and I I'm always against Sam Bennett. Everybody knows this. I always hated on this guy.
He plays so slow.
You've hated on it on Twitter before. I've seen that too, and I'm with you. You and I share that. It's like so painful. But the interesting thing was he was doing well at the harder courses, and then he also and then we were like against him because how would we know if he plays good on an easy course? And I remember he played really good on easy, and Mayo was like, see, if he's that good on a tough course, he's obviously going to play well. That's not true. I'm just saying it was more of a narrative thing, but it did come true like back-to-back weeks. And so we haven't seen this in a little while. And I definitely think when you talk about like Dunlap right there, getting the ownership, because the reason with Dunlap is not just like playing the up and comer as much as I always say it like this. Could you see his price? It works much better, by the way, in strong field events like majors and stuff. But could you see his price be a lot more than 7,100 based on everything I just read you? Yes. The answer is yes.
Yeah.
So you're like, okay, I do. That is where the get in early thing comes, because it's like, if his price next year in this field could be 8,500, could I try him at 71? We don't know if either are true, but let's try it out. So that's where that comes from. But Sam Bennett, we at least have some data on. We've seen it, and that kind of makes sense. So I think I want to get him in. Perfect single entry play, right? And he can score. Let me see if I can find it while you talk. Is there anybody else in here you want to mention? Like Novak is getting steam, and you like him, and I like him. So do you want to talk on why you like him? And I'll pull up the stuff on Bennett.
I wasn't seeing the Novak steam, but now I'm a little bit worried. I had Novak at like a pretty comfortable 5%. Are you seeing a lot higher than that, Tambo? Maybe like double digits on Novak? That's surprising to me.
I'm seeing like 7 to 9.
Okay, that's totally manageable. But I mean, Novak, Piercy, Knox, Kazire, Lipsky, Hoffman, they're all in that range for me. I'm okay with any of them. And then there's like one or two guys in the sixes that I will be utilizing.
What do you think the score gets to here?
I'll say just because Thursday, guys are going to go really low. And this is what happens at this tournament sometimes. For example, I remember Taylor Pendrith he was threatening 59 here. I think he ended up shooting 60. And then he shot 76 the following day. Like we have seen Sahith Theegala shoot 63 one day here and then shoot 80 the next day. We are going to see dramatically more difficult conditions on Friday. And I think maybe that Friday does keep the scoring low, a little bit higher. It does protect par a little bit better. I haven't dug into the weekend as much because we don't have a super forecast on that yet, but I still have to imagine they're getting to 18 or 19, Tambo. I just think that it's a 6,800 yard course. We may see 59s on Thursday if you look at that wind. There's not a breath of wind. One of the guys I play golf with pretty much twice a week, we play golf every single Thursday. He just got back from Bermuda and playing Port Royal, and he's a 7 handicap. He's a good player, but he probably didn't play from the tees they're playing from, but he's telling me it's nothing. I mean, if it's not windy, it's a joke. It's a joke. He just got back from Bermuda a couple of weeks ago. So
I thought about the same, and that's what I was going to bring up. So on Sam Bennett, RBC Canadian Open 20th, Rocket Mortgage 29th, the Wyndham, which ended up being like 20 under Lucas Glover, and there was a bunch of 18s and 16s. He got a 35th there. So it's just to show it, like at 7,300, I actually don't mind him. And then he's played well at 2 majors as well, where the field's way stronger and the courses are way tougher. So he's got enough talent to do it. And at 7,300, I think that's actually a pretty good tournament play here. So I don't mind him at that price. Yeah,
let's
I'm going to
put
throw him in. The chat can start giving us some ideas on some other guys that we talked through.
Are you playing Brian Gay? I guess that's the big 6K question.
Man.
I have him. What ownership number do you have Brian Gay at? Because I have him at like 9%.
You think he actually gets that? I don't.
He's the king of Bermuda. He's the Baron of Bermuda.
He really does crush.
Prince of Port Royal.
He just crushes in general.
He's a number. No one's been better at this golf course than he has, and he doesn't need any form, right? Like it wasn't as if he was playing excellent golf last year before he finished 12th. So I have him at 9%. Yeah, he's 6,700, and pretty much every single year he's finished top 12, right?
I'll move him up to 7. I still like him.
I'm going
to move him up to 7.
I'm not playing him, but I think that he will get ownership.
Yeah, I got him. I'll move him up 1. I don't care. Like you said, he's done well enough, and you can get different elsewhere. So depends on your lineups, but definitely got to think about what you're building with. There's so many. Everybody's 9%. Like you can make a case for all those guys are 7 to 9%.
Is there anyone else in the 6K range that you think is going to be popular? Because I don't have anyone besides Gay.
Gerard, maybe O'Hare gets a little bit. Doc, no, I guess he's 7K. So no, not really.
Yeah.
But I also don't think as many people go down here. That was what I was saying off the top. I just don't like the balance. People are literally building lineups with 4 8K guys. So it's like you just don't need to go down here very often. And that's sort of part of the case. You're just picking someone. Like I like Brian Gay, but how much will I actually play of him when it comes down to it, just due to roster construction? I don't know. Like that's really what it'll come down to. Ryan Gerard was another guy. I don't know if he's getting any steam late or not, but he popped for me. And maybe he's like, $300 less than Dunlap. It sounds like Dunlap's going to be better when you read all that stuff, but like Ryan Gerard for a play in the Bermuda, 1 tournament, the sample size of this week, all I care about, I'm fine with going to him at 6,800. So did you have other guys in the 6K range you wanted to bring up? And people can start throwing picks into the chat, and we'll start thinking about how we're going to build this single entry out.
Yeah, I don't mind Kevin Roy. I don't mind Ryan Armour. I don't mind Satoshi, Jason Duffner, but there's nobody I feel completely comfortable about. Let's build that single entry. Yeah, put in the chat guys that you want in the single entry that you feel strongly about, because I think we've only filled 1 space or 2 spaces yet.
2. I put Ryan Palmer in there too.
That's my guy. So that's my submission. So, I mean, we got to decide on the top, because you kind of sold me on Scott. Like I'm not opposed to Adam Scott by any means, but I will say it seems like we have some consensus on Glover, maybe.
Look at this puppy. Got to show you this. The course fit rankings on the site. So Lee Aldrich does this, DK Golf Bargains on Twitter. He says, okay, I'm going to put this together. I've got this set up. For 2 weeks, it's just crushed. And what's so funny is that Scott is up here. Your guy Dietrich is up here. Your boy Palmer is number 2, but he's not getting any ownership. Russell Knox is up here, who I think you mentioned as well. Like there's just a lot of the guys that we mentioned. Of course, Brian Gay is going to be up there, but this worked out extremely well last week. Kevin Yu is up here, Smalley, Griffin. Like this is all the top range. Anybody else on this list that pops for you or anything else you're thinking about with this? Because there's a lot of options on here. It only brings people into play that have played enough comparable rounds. Like it's a course fit, not a course history rankings, right? It's kind of like we use our stack rankings for football. It's really cool, and it's worked out well. Like we've had the winner a couple weeks. Last 2 weeks has been like almost everybody makes the cut. It's pretty wild. I can't get behind some of these, but you never know, right? You can try it out.
It seems like the chat is loving Harry Hall, which is I'm okay with. I'm pretty neutral on Hall this week. But I think we got to figure out where we want to go at the top.
You said I kind of sold you on
Scott.
Scott.
And it seems like you feel really strongly about Scott. The only other guy that I mentioned that it seems like we have a little bit of consensus on is that we both like Glover. And I mean, if you build a Scott, Glover, Palmer lineup, Scott, Glover, Palmer, Bennett, that leaves us with...
You still have 7K left.
Yeah. So, there are options there, but I think probably we may want to... If we go down from, I don't know if this is putting too much ownership on the table, but if we went down from Glover to Smalley, then it seems like we're cooking with a little bit more ammo to fire on some of the guys in the sevens that we like.
Yeah, I mean, then you can do like
Scott,
Novak,
Smalley. Yeah. So, and Smalley had been mentioned in the chat. So you could even get, if we want to go true to the chat, you can even go Harry Hall in and play somebody at 7K, right? Probably.
Yeah, you could also go at 7K even. You could also go off Scott and play Glover. So this is just the reason I bring it up is we talked about this earlier. You got Glover, Smalley, but then you're cutting into it heavily with Palmer and Bennett. So it's not like you're going too wild. And then you have 7,900 left where, man, who was the other guy you liked? You said Dietrich?
Well, I mean, I like Merritt and you, there are guys in the high sevens that we could play, but
the Hall takes us to the woos in that lineup. But I kind of like that Scott
Hall,
one.
Brandon Wu is interesting.
Yeah, if you go with take out Glover and go back to Scott, it gets you to 7,000 flat, but there's not much there, man. And I don't really like the 6Ks either. You'd have to take a shot on O'Hare, who the rankings like, but the chat wasn't really talking about him much. What's O'Hare been doing? I'm not really high on O'Hare.
Yeah, I'm not there on Sean O'Hare.
Oh, he putts well on Bermuda. That's where I see it now. Okay. Probably part of it as well. That would make sense. So, okay. So we got Bennett, Palmer, Smalley. I think we have to, if we take out Scott for a second with Hall, because the chat really liked Hall.
Yep.
My pick was Bennett. Your original was Palmer. The chat loves Smalley and Hall. That leaves us 8,850 per. So it's Glover and one of the woos. It is Scott and 7,000. And then it's also your guy Dietrich and 7,200. Chuck Hoffman. Who else?
I do love Chuck Hoffman. Let's present one or two 2v2s and let the chat decide.
Okay, I think it's just those two then. Let's go Scott.
Yeah, what about your boy Pendrith?
Okay, let's look at that one. Pendrith. Okay, it's Pendrith Hardy. Here's what we got. Pendrith Hardy.
Okay.
Or Glover and a Woo. That's really what it looks like.
I would nominate Brandon, but you nominate
we'll
Dylan.
Do that one. Or Glover.
The one that Brian just posted in the chat, because I'm playing Piercy. I think Piercy's going to be good this week. I'm playing him.
Seeing if he popped up anywhere here for us.
He popped up for me. I can tell you that much.
Let me see this chart over here. Piercy. He's popping on the models. I know that much.
Yeah, he popped up for me, certainly. So you could do Scott Piercy, Glover, Woo.
Is Scott Piercy in the field? Maybe he's the answer. He is 7,200.
Yeah.
I know what you're saying, but you could do Scott Piercy, the player, as well.
Yeah.
All right, let's see what the chat said. I thought I plugged it in here, didn't I? All right, Glover, Woo, Pendrith Hardy. We got 1 for 1 so far. What do you think is more popular with what we have?
I think that the combined ownership of Glover, Brandon Wu is not significantly, is a little bit lower. Because I think Pendrith's a bit higher than Glover. And I think Woo and Hardy are pretty similar.
The thing you can get away with Pendrith Hardy because
it's a bummer too, is I like Hubbard way more than Hardy, but we don't have the cash for that.
Hubbard more than Hardy?
I do. I don't think we have the cash for that though.
I don't think so either. You'd have to come down on Smalley.
No, and I'd rather play Smalley than Hubbard. Let's do
Pendrith
Hardy. Yeah.
The Pendrith is that too chalky though with Pendrith, Hardy, and Smalley versus the Glover, Woo, Brandon Woo?
And is that how we're starting?
Well, we've got Glover at the top.
Yeah. Pendrith, Glover, Smalley, Palmer, Bennett, Woo.
The chat wants Pendrith Hardy, I guess. That we talked enough about it. They were on them before. Let's do that.
It's interesting build. That's it. You really think Glover's going to be a lot of people's first man in? I think it's an interesting build. And I don't think anyone's going to play Sam Bennett. And
but we don't have Glover anymore. We go the Hardy route though.
We don't have Palmer?
No. We don't have Glover. I'm saying we start our build with Pendrith. So it goes Pendrith with 3 8Ks, Smalley, Hardy, Palmer, and then it's Harry Hall.
That's a weird build. That's a unique build. I'm not concerned about that lineup getting duped.
Yeah, definitely not concerned about it getting duped. So I don't mind it. And I said it before. One of the things about playing a thing like Hardy, and those guys mixed together, if you're going to start with Pendrith, I kind of like just starting. If you're going to play Pendrith with Smalley, I kind of don't hate just starting with the two of them. Right. Because I think most people would be inclined to have one above them, right? Don't you?
I'd agree with that. Let's rip it.
All right. Pendrith and Hardy is who we went with. And the opposite, if you guys want to take it and try it out, was Glover with Brandon Woo. So, all right. I'm good with this. Anything else you got, my friend, on the old, the Buddy B or whatever you called it here? This event's going to be good.
Nope. It's going to be awesome. Listen, if this gets 1 second of screen time for me on Sunday, it means we have got a lot of boring football games. But you never know. I think it's kind of early. We're back to, because Bermuda's in the Atlantic. So, I believe that this might be on the time. We don't need to get into it. It's on Eastern time zone or something close to Eastern time zone. So you'll at least get it when you wake up pretty much, or at least I will for the most part on the West Coast.
This is a good point from Adam. The Glover will be more popular among American DFS players, Pendrith for anyone outside of Ontario. That's right. And then Samuel, we're just talking through ownership. When we do this show, if you're watching for the first time, the way it works is we talk about what the field's doing throughout, where some of the steam is going, all the different angles that people are taking on the tournament from. And then in the end, we're trying to build something that's going to be unique and still have a way to get to the top. And that's what we said, is that this week, while we know Pendrith and Smalley will be popular, how many people will be starting their builds at Pendrith at 90, 100 with just him versus something else? So I think that's where it gets different. Most people will have a Griffin or a Glover or a Herbert or Norin or a Todd Scott. All those guys at the top are getting 15 to 25% range, probably even higher, maybe 17 to 25% range. So feel pretty good about where we're at, my friend. We'll talk for next week. I can tell you guys for a fact, I will not be here next week. I'm traveling to Miami for the King of the Beach. Appreciate all the support. We're going to work something out. Andy's likely going to be on here with a guest, but I'll be on here. Yeah.
Substitute teacher time. We'll steer the ship.
Yeah, that's perfect. So keep you guys informed on that. We'll definitely set you guys up. The tidbits are out for football. I swapped them after week 17 or so, whenever their golf actually gets started again and football ends. But that's definitely the time you'll see those come back. And then the last question, was it viable to leave this? Yes, it's fine. Like this week, especially when there's players like this, you don't have to force yourself up to the top or in these ranges if you don't want to. So I actually have no problem if you guys want to change that out. Any final thoughts from you, Andy, before we get out of here?
No, sir. Good luck with all of your bets this week. And Yeah, we will be back next week. I will be back next week, at least for the RSM last one of the year.
Last one, and then we'll be back all season long. You know that happens. There's not going to be anything in the way of that. So you and I will be here every week during the regular season. So I'll be excited. It's been a great swing season with you, my friend. I appreciate you being on here with me. That's going to do it for this one, guys. Thank you so much for the support, for Andy, for myself, ToeTagginTambo. Let's ship it.